Have you ever wondered why the book of Deuteronomy in the Bible is often referred to as the repetition of the law? This intriguing title sparks curiosity, and rightly so. Deuteronomy, the fifth and final book of the Pentateuch or Torah, is a rich tapestry of ancient wisdom, divine commands, and historical narrative. Let's start with the name Deuteronomy. Derived from the Greek word Deuteronomion, it translates to second law or repetition of the law. This is a fitting title as the book largely consists of a series of speeches given by Moses, reiterating the laws and commandments previously given to the Israelites in the wilderness of Sinai. The book of Deuteronomy holds a unique place in the Pentateuch. While Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers form a narrative arc that tells the story of the Israelites from creation to their wanderings in the desert, Deuteronomy stands somewhat apart. It serves as a recapitulation, a restatement, and in some ways an expansion of the laws and teachings found in the previous books. Traditionally attributed to Moses, Deuteronomy is often seen as his farewell address to the Israelites. He reminds them of their history, reiterates God's commandments, and lays out the blessings and curses that will follow obedience or disobedience. As we delve into the book, we encounter Moses, not only as a leader and lawgiver, but also as a teacher, prophet, and historian. He speaks with authority, yes, but also with a warmth and concern for the people he has led for so many years. His words are filled with reminders of God's faithfulness, admonitions to obedience, and the promise of a land flowing with milk and honey. However, Deuteronomy isn't just about the past. It is a book that resonates with timeless truths and principles that are relevant even today. Its teachings continue to provide guidance, comfort, and challenge to its readers. As we delve deeper, you'll discover the rich layers of meaning hidden within this ancient text. So let's embark on this journey together, exploring the profound wisdom and enduring truths of the book of Deuteronomy. The journey begins with a recap of Israel's wanderings, but why? A question that might have crossed your mind as you delve into the first chapters of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, a book of speeches delivered by Moses, starts with a recounting of Israel's 40-year journey in the wilderness. This recap, however, is not a simple retelling of events. It's a carefully crafted narrative designed to remind the Israelites of their past, their mistakes, their triumphs, and above all, the unwavering faithfulness of God. In the first 4 chapters of Deuteronomy, we see Moses as a seasoned leader, addressing the second generation of Israelites who are on the brink of entering the promised land. He reminds them of their parents' failures and warns them not to repeat the same mistakes. The recap serves as a mirror, reflecting the consequences of disobedience and unbelief. But it's not all about admonition. Moses also highlights God's divine intervention and guidance throughout their journey. From the victory over King Sihon and Og, to the provision of manna and quail in the wilderness, these stories underline God's commitment to his people, even when they fell short. This recounting is not just about the past, it's also about the future. Moses uses the past as a foundation to prepare the Israelites for their future in the promised land. He wants them to understand that the same God who guided and protected them in the wilderness is the same God who will be with them in Canaan. In a way, the first 4 chapters of Deuteronomy act as a bridge between the past and the future. They show us that history is not just a collection of events, but a tool for understanding God's character and his plans for his people. So, as we unpack the first section of Deuteronomy, we see a masterful blend of history, prophecy, and theology. It's a reminder of our own wanderings, our own failures, and the faithfulness of a God who never gives up on us. Moses' recounting of the past serves as a reminder of God's faithfulness, setting the stage for the rest of the book. It's a story that resonates across generations, inviting us to reflect, learn, and grow in our own faith journey. Now we come to the heart of Deuteronomy, the repetition of the law. But is it just about rules and regulations? Let's delve into the second section of Deuteronomy, spanning from chapter 5 to 28. This portion of the book is often seen as the kernel of Deuteronomy, containing a restatement of the 10 Commandments, first given to the Israelites on Mount Sinai. But is it merely a repetition? Not quite. It's a reaffirmation, a renewal of the covenant between God and his people. The 10 Commandments aren't just about rules or do's and don'ts. They form the basis of a relationship, a covenant between God and the Israelites. These laws are not arbitrary, but rather a reflection of God's character and his desire for his people to live in a way that honors him and respects others. The commandments begin with the phrase, "I am the Lord your God." This isn't a demand for blind obedience, but rather a reminder of God's saving acts and his continued commitment to his people. The Israelites are called not only to obey these laws, but also to internalize them, to let them shape their hearts and their community. Moving forward, chapters 6 to 11 elaborate on the first commandment, the call to exclusive loyalty to God. It's here that we find the Shema, the central prayer of Judaism. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." This prayer is a call to love God with all of one's heart, soul, and strength. The next section, chapters 12 to 26, provides a detailed exposition of the remaining commandments. These laws touch on every aspect of life, from worship to warfare, from economics to ethics, showing how the love for God and neighbor is to be lived out in practical ways. But Deuteronomy doesn't just lay out laws and commandments, it also presents the blessings and curses associated with obedience and disobedience. If the Israelites obey God's laws, they will be blessed in the land God is giving them. If they disobey, they will face the consequences of their actions. Yet, even in the warnings of curses, there's a glimmer of grace. God promises that if his people turn back to him, even from the most distant lands, he will restore them. This shows a God who is not merely interested in obedience, but in relationship. In these chapters, we see a picture of a God who desires relationship, not ritual. A God who is more interested in the state of our hearts than our adherence to rules. A God who is willing to forgive and restore when we fail and fall short. In these chapters, we see a God who desires relationship, not ritual, and a people learning to live in the light of his love. As we reach the end of Deuteronomy, we find a series of speeches and a poignant farewell. What can we learn from these final chapters? Inhale the timeless wisdom of these pages, where Moses, the humble servant of God, delivers his final speeches. These discourses, filled with deep love for his people and unyielding obedience to God, set a high bar for leadership, both spiritual and secular. In chapters 29 and 30, we witness the renewal of the covenant, a pivotal moment that emphasizes the Israelites' commitment to follow God's law. Moses speaks with an urgency, reminding the Israelites of their history, their deliverance from Egypt, and their covenant with God. He implores them to choose life, to choose obedience to God's commands, and to choose the blessings that come with it. This is more than a historical account. It's a heartfelt plea from a leader who understands the consequences of disobedience. Moses knows he will not enter the promised land with them, yet his concern is for their future, their prosperity in the land that God has promised them. As we move to chapters 31 to 34, we see a transition of leadership. Joshua, Moses' faithful assistant, is appointed as the new leader. Moses, in his characteristic humility, encourages Joshua in front of all Israel, ensuring a smooth transition. He entrusts him with the responsibility of leading the Israelites into the promised land. This transition is not just about passing the baton. It's about Moses' faith in God's plan, his acceptance of God's will, and his trust in Joshua. The book concludes with the death of Moses. His life is celebrated, his leadership lauded, and his devotion to God acknowledged. Despite his personal disappointment, Moses remains committed to God's will until the end. In Moses' farewell, we see a leader fully dedicated to God's will, highlighting the importance of obedience and trust in God's promises. This is the legacy of Moses, a legacy of faith, obedience, and unwavering trust in God's promises. So, how does an ancient book like Deuteronomy speak to us today? This question might seem complex at first glance, as we consider the vast distance, both in time and culture, that separates us from the book's original audience. However, when we delve into the heart of Deuteronomy, we discover timeless principles that speak powerfully into our lives today. One of the central themes in Deuteronomy is the call to love God with all our heart, soul, and strength. This command, found in Deuteronomy 6 verse 5, is echoed in the teachings of Jesus and remains a foundational tenet of Christianity. In our world today, where distractions and competing loyalties abound, this call to wholehearted devotion is as relevant as ever. It challenges us to examine our priorities and consider whether our love for God is truly at the center of our lives. Another key theme in Deuteronomy is obedience. The book is filled with instructions and laws, many of which speak to the importance of living in alignment with God's will. While some of these laws are specific to the cultural context of ancient Israel, the underlying principle is universally applicable. It emphasizes the value of obedience not as a means to earn God's favor, but as a response to His love and grace. This is a poignant reminder for us today, in a society that often prizes independence and self-determination over submission to divine authority. Deuteronomy also underscores the importance of remembering God's faithfulness. Throughout the book, the Israelites are exhorted to remember how God delivered them from slavery, provided for their needs in the wilderness, and led them to the Promised Land. This theme of remembrance resonates deeply with us today, as we too face challenges and uncertainties. It encourages us to reflect on God's past faithfulness as a source of hope and assurance for the future. Lastly, Deuteronomy's emphasis on community and mutual responsibility has profound implications in our contemporary context. The laws and instructions given in the book are not merely about individual morality, but also about creating a just and compassionate society. In a world where individualism and self-interest often reign supreme, this communal ethic challenges us to consider our responsibility towards others and to strive for justice and equity in our communities. In conclusion, while Deuteronomy is an ancient text, its messages are timeless. It teaches us about love for God, the value of obedience, the importance of remembering God's faithfulness, and the necessity of communal responsibility. These principles, if applied, can profoundly shape our lives and our communities. Deuteronomy, though ancient, holds enduring truths that continue to guide and inspire us in our journey with God. We've journeyed through Deuteronomy, but there's always more to uncover. And so, here we stand at the finale of our journey through the rich tapestry of Deuteronomy. We've trekked through the wilderness of the Israelites' wanderings, scaled the mountains of Moses' sermons, and dived deep into the river of laws that flow through this book. Yet, as we've discovered, every step taken in Deuteronomy is a step closer to understanding God's heart and His unchanging love for His people. Our expedition began with Deuteronomy chapters 1-4. Here, the Israelites stood on the precipice of the Promised Land, looking back at their 40 years of wandering. It served as a reminder to us all that even in our wanderings, God is faithful and His promises endure. Then we ventured into the second section, chapters 5-28, where Moses expounded the law to the new generation of Israelites. This wasn't just a list of do's and don'ts, but a reflection of God's heart for justice, righteousness, and love. It was about creating a society that reflected God's character and His care for the least among us. Next, we explored the third and final section, chapters 29-34. Here, we witnessed Moses' farewell, the transition of leadership to Joshua, and the poignant end of Moses' life. We saw Moses' faithfulness to the end, his unwavering commitment to God's people, and his hope for their future. And finally, we reflected on the relevance of Deuteronomy today. We found that this ancient text still speaks to us, challenging us to live justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. Deuteronomy continues to teach us about God's faithfulness, His justice, and His unending love. But our journey doesn't end here. Far from it. The book of Deuteronomy is a treasure trove of wisdom and revelation waiting to be discovered. Each verse, each word, each letter has the potential to reveal something new about God, about ourselves, and about the world we live in. So I invite you, continue the journey, dive deeper into the book of Deuteronomy. Let it challenge you, let it comfort you, let it transform you. Let it speak to you in the quiet moments, in the hard moments, in the joyful moments. Whether you're a seasoned Bible scholar or a curious seeker, there's always more to uncover in the rich soil of Scripture. Remember, the Bible is more than just a book. It's a conversation with God, a sacred dialogue between the Creator and His creation. And Deuteronomy, with its laws and stories, its blessings and curses, its promises and warnings, is a crucial part of that conversation. So don't rush. Take your time. Linger in the words. Savor the truths. Let them sink into your heart and mind. May your journey through Deuteronomy enrich your understanding of God's heart and His unchanging love for His people.